All right, guys, with the January transfer window just coming to a close, a lot has come to light and a lot of conversations have happened really since these last two windows, but especially in this last, half season about multi-club ownerships. I've got my opinion on it. I know a lot of people do. There's definitely some pros to it. There's a lot of, from a fan's perspective, there's a lot of cons, it seems like, and more just keep coming to light. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit. I want you guys to share your opinions if you guys like multi club ownerships, especially if you're the fans of some of these clubs. I want to know. But I mean, yeah, multi club ownerships, if you guys don't know, is essentially where one person or most of them, it's pretty much always groups, a group, a financial group, investor group, has ownership in multiple clubs. It might be, minority ownership in one, majority in one. So like something like RedBird Capital is a majority stakeholder in Liverpool. It's really it's where like Fenway Sports Group comes in, and then just some other investors in there. But RedBird Capital are also a part of AC Milan. AC Milan though, it's just a minority in one, a majority in one. It just kind of makes sense just to get some extra investment in there. Um, but then you've got larger groups, something like the City Football Group, City Group, having Manchester City, New York City, Melbourne City, Girona, all in there throughout all a bunch of different clubs. Obviously, you've got the Red Bull organization with RB Leipzig, RB Salzburg, New York Red Bulls, and I think they have a team in Brazil now as well. There's a lot. There's a lot of clubs, multi-club ownership groups. It's continuing to grow more and more as some of these clubs are really starting to take advantage. Some of these groups are taking advantage as they essentially tier off their clubs within their organizational group. So, talk about some of the key parts of it. The beneficial side of it is some talent identification and development and pathways. It's you see it a lot of times with Red Bull. A lot. I will. There's several players that have gone from New York Red Bulls to Salzburg, but most notably, a lot of players going from Salzburg to Leipzig and then Leipzig elsewhere. I know that somebody like Dominic Soboslai made that move. I mean, he's having a great year as well, but there's a lot of guys that have gone, even if it's just a loan spell, taking a loan spell at Salzburg and then making their way up to Leipzig and then on to bigger and better things and, Champions Leagues and league titles and stuff all over the place. So there's definitely that side of things. While necessarily there hasn't been a great deal from some of these clubs in term and organizations of this clear identification and development pathway. I think that a prime example, honestly, is Brighton. Brighton have also partly, I think it's Brighton, has a minority ownership of Midtjylland as well over in Denmark, but they also have a like academy program down in Ghana for African players, and you're starting to see some come through at Midtjylland as well as Brighton. But this also creates a bit of a financial diversification amongst these investments. It's one investment in one area of investment, but spread out through multiple clubs. You can have a club that makes a lot of money, and another club that maybe doesn't make as much money throughout one season, but in terms of investment book, it makes a little bit more sense. It evens out and really helps the cause. Whereas if you just have one club, they do really well year after year after year, your wage bill goes up. You look at the Premier League, look at the wages that they get in the Premier League and the money that's in it, then you get relegated and you get dropped down, and all of a sudden you have to, scramble and sell a bunch of things. It's just a mess. It can be a mess, very much so. You're paying consistent high Champions League wages, and then all of a sudden you drop out of Europe completely. Your wage books will get screwed up. Your finance books will all get screwed up very, very easily. So if you have multiple risks, financial, it limits the risk, multiple investments there. And again, same along with that, increased revenue streams. You got more areas of income, more areas of revenue coming in, and really, and a lot of times you can use that to also help with scouting. If you have a club in Ghana and you have a club in England, and then you have a club in Australia and you have a club in the US, it helps with scouting. You don't have to have one club, all your scouts on one club's books and send them everywhere and have one guy here, one guy here, one guy here. It just was really tough. And, even though I know there's a lot of conversation actually happening recently, because I saw where Bayern Munich is setting up essentially like an academy center in California, and very rarely do those end up paying out. It's just true. It's the matter of fact. A lot of times you pay extra money for it. They never make their way to Bayern Munich or whatever. But at the same time, I'm sure a lot of these players that go through some of these academy programs, foreign academies like that Bayern Munich in California, or Barcelona is up and down the East Coast. Some, I know Celtic had one. Liverpool's got some over here. So there's a lot of those over here in the States, and I'm sure elsewhere as well. But I'm sure a lot of these times they end up making their way into college and, USL, MLS type leagues, or, just around. While, yes, not the very top, they still can make it and be successful and make that program a success. But it also allows just scouting capabilities. A lot of these MLS clubs and everything, clubs really just everywhere, they've got all these academies and scouts and their own individual scouts and individual youth scouts and everything. So the more scouts you have, the more eyes you have watching players and training players and coaching and everything like that, the more likely you are to find some of those good players to end up making some extra money and helping yourself and your club become very successful. But there's definitely concerns, and a lot of concerns, and continuously that concern list is growing. So one of the absolutely biggest things that people have hated when it comes, fans have hated, is really how it plays into UEFA regulations, how UEFA regulations really impact this whole scenario. Is definitely seemed like some groups get a bye. I know City and Girona have both played in Champions League. It's been no big deal. And, both Red Bull teams have played in the Champions League before at the same time. Stuff like that is very true. But I think that the UEFA ended up becoming more strict on it, which is why it's really starting to spark up some. So recently, I know that Manchester United and Nice had some, discrepancies and some issues with it as well. But going into the season, Crystal Palace finally win a trophy. They win their first FA Cup in history, the first club or their major trophy in history. FA Cup gets a spot into Europa League. They get that spot. Well, Lyon also qualify for the Europa League, both of which are owned by, I think it's like Eagle Sporting Group or whatever they're considered. They're both owned by the same group and the same owners for the most part, majority stakes wise. And so because Lyon finished higher in the French league compared to Palace in the Premier League, Lyon got the spot, and Palace were seemingly out of Europe. But then they were back into Europe because Lyon had financial issues. And then when Lyon solved those financial issues, got back in Europa League, Palace were still in Europa League. Then Forest went ahead, started complaining, and some other clubs, I believe, joined in. Palace dropped down to into Conference League, and Forest went up into the Europa League. It's, stuff like that is a huge issue. I know I've seen it several times before, but it's definitely starting to spark more and more of those issues, especially in UEFA. It's becoming more of an issue. With that, as well as, conflict of interest type stuff. A big one right now is happening in Saudi Arabia in the Saudi Pro League with the Saudi Investment Group, and the fact that they own 4 Saudi Arabian teams and Newcastle. I just think that is something that just makes no sense. They own Al Nasser, Al Hilal. I think it's Al Nasser, Al Hilal, Al Ittihad. It may not be Al Nasser, but I know it's Al Hilal and Ittihad because that's where the big controversy is. And Karim Benzema, the transfer from Al Ittihad to Al Hilal are in first place, and they're a much better side compared to Al Ittihad this season. So Benzema made the move. Ronaldo's trying to block it himself and is complaining about how that's even possible, and is throwing a big fit and refusing to play. And honestly, when I first saw it, I'm like, it's just a move between 2 clubs. Why is he complaining? Then I saw it's essentially they're the same owners, and Then I also saw where part of the transfer fee is being paid by an outside source, a third party essentially. So I can understand with Ronaldo in this situation. I actually sympathize with him. I feel bad for him. I'm a Messi fan all day long, but this is just not right. Stuff like that happens all the time. You look at Chelsea, and again, this is also just the whole hierarchy and conflict of interest type stuff. Chelsea have an up and down year. They sack their manager, and then they go right to Strasbourg and say, "You're coming over to Chelsea because we want to." And then they use Strasbourg as essentially a U23 team, it seems like at this point, Chelsea does, or just a lone farm team. And they just send a whole bunch of players. They buy 45 players a window, send half of them to Strasbourg in France. And then the moment that they start doing well, they bring them back and maybe they sell them to somebody else or whatever. Or they'll just, they have one, buy the other. And again, that's another thing that's happened as well. It's just one club buying another club's player. We just saw it with Marinakis' side. He's the owner of Olympiacos as well as Nottingham Forest and Rio Ave in Portugal. Rio Ave are struggling in the Portuguese league this season. They've had two players that have done very well and very, very cheap, well below what was anticipated. They make both of those players make the move to Olympiacos to help push them for their trophy, leaving Rio Ave to struggle. And again, think about this. These are fans. This is not Football Manager. I love Football Manager, but this isn't it. This isn't FIFA. This isn't some video game where you don't have to take into effect the real people that are behind these clubs, that work at these clubs, that are fans of these clubs. They show up every single day. They live and breathe and bleed these teams. They're hurt by some of this. I mean, you think about how Strasbourg, they're doing so well, and all of a sudden off goes their manager, and they're the second thought. It's very clear. It sounds like Strasbourg is second fiddle to Chelsea, and clearly with the Marinakis situation, Rio Ave is very clearly second fiddle to Nottingham Forest and Olympiacos. Most likely Olympiacos is first, followed by Forest, and then Rio Ave. It very much sets these clear hierarchical standards from within the clubs and within the ownership organization, and I think that's just very wrong. I mean, obviously somebody like Red Bull, it's kind of hard. You can't really pin it on them because Leipzig is in the Bundesliga. They're a better side and a better league. It's very clear that that's how it works. Then you have Salzburg, who's in the Austrian league. They're still very good. It's not like they're just crap and they don't win anything ever. Nothing like that. It's not like that. So in that aspect, I think Salzburg is actually fine. Yes, there's a hierarchy, but it's just a very well-established hierarchy. You just expect that to be a general pathway of development. But when Man City bought Savinho, they bought him for very cheap. Bournemouth have been very good avoiding any kind of controversy with their multi-club ownership. Their owners have Lorient in France as well as obviously Bournemouth, and then they had offers. Lorient did for Junior Krupi, their striker, had a very good year in the French league, and then Bournemouth went ahead and purchased him for much cheaper than any of the other offers that came into Lorient, and now he's killing it in the Premier League. Stuff like that is just a very poor conflict of interest, and I cannot believe that there still aren't regulations into effect. I know that they continue to do so. New rules came in, I think, in 2024 to help start limiting this multi-club ownership issues and conflicts, but it's still constantly happening. Someone like Chelsea and Man City and some of these other ones like the Saudi investment group and all, they're just going to find the loopholes. If there's not a rule saying you can't do it, they're going to do it. And until you tell them they can't, same thing with Chelsea handing out like 8-year contracts. It's just a way to spread out that money. So to avoid FFP, it just makes sense. If the rules are really, thin and porous, then they're going to break the rules as much as you can. But another one that I know a lot of people have complained about, and the Red Bull organization is the main ones with this. It is the local identity, the impact on it. You're taking 3 clubs, New York Red Bulls, Red Bull Salzburg, RB Leipzig. 3 clubs, all have their own clubs, own identity, own colors, own badges, own kits, all of that, their very own. And then here comes Red Bull, buys them all up, and let's slap Red Bull on it, make Red Bull the logo, just change the little name from New York to Leipzig to Salzburg, and there you go. Everybody has pretty much the same kits for the most part, and you're good to go. Something like that is very, very poor. I want to say they're one of the only groups that have done that. Not off the top of my head, in terms of major group or multi clubs ownerships that have done that, but that's the one thing I know that a lot of fans hate the Red Bull group for, is that they just came through and just stripped away all the local identity and the actual club culture that they had, and just slapped Red Bull on it and went on their very way. I agree that that's just kind of off. Have a Red Bull sponsor on the shirt, make the stadiums the Red Bull arenas or whatever, but to really just kind of strip away the whole club, it's just really tough. It really, really hurts. I'm sure some of those fans that have been fans for the clubs for a long, long time we're very, very disappointed by the fact of how those things went. And it just makes a lot of sense that they would get very, very upset. I mean, and the thing is, there's a lot of multi-club ownerships out there. A lot more than a lot of people probably realize. I'm looking right now. There's Pacific Media Group. They own Dundalk in Ireland and Queen's Park in Scotland, and they're really focused on the player development and data analytics and stuff like that. 777 Partners. They've got stakes in Genoa, Steiner Liège, Hertha Berlin, and Vasco da Gama in Brazil. So there's a lot of ownership groups out there, but I think just the major ones will start to spoil it for other people. Your City group, your Red Bull group, the Chelsea group, the Blueco, I think it's called. Groups like that are the ones that are really going to hurt a lot of clubs in the long run. But again, there's so many football groups. I'm looking now. Silver Lake / the City Football Group. They have Man City, Girona, Lomo, Palermo, New York City, Melbourne City, Estac, Yokohama Marinos, Montevideo City, Mumbai City, Bahia, Shenzhen Peng City FC, and Club Bolivar. All of those clubs owned by essentially the same investment group. You can see why there's a lot of issues there. I'm not opposed to multi-club ownership groups. This is how I'm going to end it off. I'm just going to say I'm not opposed to multi-club ownership groups. I'm not. But in my opinion, you should only be allowed one country or one club per continent. Hey, you're at your 6. There you go. There's your 6. You're done. Have a club in the U.S. Have a club in Uruguay. Have a club in Liechtenstein and Nigeria and Australia, New Zealand. There you go. There's your 6 clubs, 6 confederations. You're done. You're maxed out. Maybe they have minority, in some other ones. That's when you start getting into majority ownership type stuff. But it's a very touchy subject, and I think it's a very hot topic right now, with these last 2 transfer windows really sparking a lot of multi-club ownership transfers. I think it's just going to continue to have those conversations between UEFA regulations with qualification for Europe and transfers and all. I think it's just going to continue to have that conversation. It's going to continue to churn really for the next couple of years until UEFA does something about it. But I don't see it happening anytime soon, because it's all about the money. People like City and that Saudi investment group, they're just going to say, whoa, we're giving you a lot of money. Let us do what we want, essentially. That's why we haven't heard about City's FFP trials and charges. I'm not accusing them of paying them off, but at the same time, something seems fishy with that one. Everything get docked points like 5 or 6 different times. It just seems odd. But yeah, I expect multi-club ownerships in this fathom to continue on for a long, long time. I don't see it going away anytime soon. Maybe some extra, regulations come in the next couple of years, but I don't see it being anything major for now. But yeah, let me know where you guys stand on multi-club ownership groups. Are you guys a fan of somebody that's in one? Or, even if you're a Chelsea fan, how do you view your partnership with Strasbourg, and how do you view that? Or, maybe if you're a Bayern Munich fan and have been a Bayern Munich fan for 20 years, how do you view the Red Bull system and program in their group? But let me know what you guys think and your opinion on the multi-club ownership group and the whole scenario. And yeah, interested to hear what you guys think, your guys' takes on it. And thank you guys so much for watching.